what lessons can medicine learn by listening to those who live it every day? What happens when patients advocate not just for themselves, but for others like them? The stories that shape the future of healthcare are the stories we tell today. This is the Patient Perspectives Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Patient Perspectives Podcast. My name is Lauren Scholler, and I'm here today with Kait Williams, who is an occupational therapist, a writer, a patient with miserable malalignment syndrome, and overall just a strong patient advocate and educator on her conditions and experiences. I've had the privilege of connecting with Kait through social media and Miles for Hips, which is a hip dysplasia advocacy organization that she's contributed educational materials to. And outside of that, she enjoys writing poetry, learning languages, watching sports, and traveling. Thank you for joining the Patient Perspectives podcast, Kait.
Thank you for having me.
To start, do you want to share a little bit about your diagnosis, what your journey as a patient has been, and what that has looked like?
Yeah, so I kind of have a long journey. I had pain in my legs for as long as I could remember, but I thought it was normal. I definitely thought everybody had pain, and especially because I was, super athletic. I was a runner. I played tennis and soccer, tried all the sports. I thought that that was just a normal part of being active. And it wasn't until I was in college, actually in my occupational therapy class, one of my classmates asked me a question of if, like, what's the normal pain on the pain scale to have? And my answer was 5 or 6. And she looked at me and she was like, no, like, you really shouldn't have pain. And then I definitely started noticing, like I was running a lot at the time and training for half marathons, and like I would come home and my hips would hurt so bad. And I would even have my roommate help me kind of like pop my hips into place because like they felt like they weren't in the socket correctly. And yeah, and then after I graduated from college, the hip pain got really, really bad. So I decided to go to an orthopedic surgeon to see what was going on. And I got an MRI, and the MRI showed that I had the femoroacetabular impingement and a labral tear. And so that was when I had my first surgery, and that was the first of many. And that surgery itself was extremely difficult. I really struggled, with my communication, like with this surgeon in particular. And I didn't recover well from that surgery. And then I ended up having to have a revision surgery, like on that same hip, because it was worse than when I had gone in for surgery. And then I continued to have pain, and I found another surgeon who did the same thing on my left hip as well. And then I continued to have pain. So I had to really fight for answers because I knew that something, still wasn't right with my legs. And I definitely thought that, my legs looked different from everybody else. I could tell that my femurs pointed in and my tibias went out. And I think I kind of had mastered like, how to stand without making it noticeable, but like I knew something was wrong. So, I did my own research, and I even like turned to a Facebook group to see if anybody had any suggestions of like what I should do or where should I go to get help. And somebody actually commented on my post and mentioned miserable malalignment syndrome. And yeah, from there, I was able to find a surgeon who diagnosed me with the condition and was able to perform the surgeries.
Wow, that is a really long journey.
Yeah,
And
I know.
yeah. And I know that before that you were talking about how you were in school to be an occupational therapist. And were there any ways that your experiences professionally in healthcare in the field of occupational therapy, did that influence your determination to advocate for better patient care or influence the way that you were able to find resources and navigate such an overwhelming process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, I think my background in the medical field was really helpful. Like, I knew a lot of the medical terms. So I understood, what was going on, like when I would do like my own research or, reading reports or anything like that. And also I felt like that was helpful in the way that I communicated with my doctors, because like I could, very like I could articulate, certain things in a different way. So I think that was really helpful. Also, like I knew my rights as a patient. Like I knew that if I wasn't, satisfied with one doctor, that I could seek another opinion, multiple opinions if I wanted, and I didn't have to, feel like I had to go, with that one doctor. Um, and I also think that like advocating for what I knew to be true in my body was helpful, and like I wouldn't settle for less like for one of my patients. So like I don't want to do the same for me. Like I want to make sure that I get the same care that I would, be advocating for, for my patients.
Absolutely. And I think that it shows a lot of persistence in really advocating that led to your diagnosis of miserable malalignment syndrome. And so, what advice do you have for patients struggling to advocate for themselves in the medical system or who may be feeling unheard?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, trust your instincts. Like I wish I did that, with my own body. And I do wish, like, even though I feel like I could communicate well, I wasn't always completely honest with how I was feeling. Like I went in very stoic to these appointments and just like, sitting there like talking in the same, kind of language as like a medical professional, like that didn't always, align with how I was actually feeling. So I think, being really honest with yourself about like what symptoms you're experiencing, how you're feeling physically or emotionally is super important. Um, and I also think you, to some extent, taking matters into your own hands and like asking questions and educating yourself on your condition can be really helpful for you in the long run too.
Are there ways that you think healthcare providers can better support patients in advocating when they feel unheard?
I think like encouraging the communication and like allowing the patient to like talk about how they're feeling physically and emotionally, like I said, is really good. And, allowing time to get to know the patient. I know this could be really difficult in the medical field, with that a lot going on and, time is can be an issue. But like, just getting to know like what their symptoms are, what their daily life is like, what their goals are in life. That was one thing that I wish the first surgeon that I had, got to know a little bit more. I wish he, took the time to understand who I am and what my goals were. Like my ultimate goal was to get back to running again. And I wasn't going to give up that easily. And we also had a bit of a disagreement on when I should have the surgery. Because I had just graduated from school and I was going to take my boards to be an occupational therapist. At the same time, all this hip stuff was going on, and he recommended that I take the boards first and then have the surgery. But I didn't agree with that. I thought I should like, have the surgery, study for my boards because I was just going to be home recovering anyway, and then go straight into the workforce instead of straight into surgery. We didn't see eye to eye on that. So I just really wish that he would have, got to know me better and, what my goals were and what the direction I really wanted to go in with my life and, with my health. Um, so yeah, definitely just being together like on, the same treatment plan.
Absolutely. I think I tend to gravitate towards the idea of a patient provider partnership where like you really are partners and you're a team and you're working through that together. And in order to be a strong team, you need to understand each other's goals and each other's preferences. And so I think that really touches upon a lot of what you said and how healthcare providers can support their patients, but also on, on the other end of things, how patients can advocate for a stronger partnership with their providers.
Right, right. And one of the things that I really appreciate about my surgeon now, like his or like my goals are his goals. And I really like that. Like he envisions me running again and, being able to do all the things that I want to do. And to me that means the world that, we are on the same page and every decision that like we're making is like rooted in those goals.
I got chills when you said that because that's what patient-centered care is, and that's how every patient deserves to be treated and cared for by their team, is to have the patient's goals at the center of your conversations and at the center of your treatment plan. So I'm glad that you have a team that does that. One thing that I want to talk about is that you published an article in the journal Clinical Orthopedics and Related Research as part of their column, What I Wish My Surgeon Knew. And in this, even just the title of it, I think is so powerful, which is that I'm more than a hip. And can you kind of talk about your inspiration for writing that and kind of what it means to you?
Definitely. So I think, for me, as I mentioned, my first surgery was really difficult, with that surgeon, and we were not on the same page. And I guess I didn't really understand like what it really could be like until I found my current surgeon. And, just how much he like takes the time to view me like as a whole person and not just an image. So, like, when it came to my diagnosis, doctors were only looking at my hip joint or, my knee and not my leg as a whole. And that, was a missing piece. Like I was having all of that pain, not necessarily because of things going on in the joint itself, but the entire like, structure of the leg. Um, but I also think that my surgeon does a really good job of looking beyond the leg too. He looks again at my goals and how I'm feeling emotionally, which means the world to me. He takes the time, to actively listen to how I'm feeling, and he acknowledges all the emotions that come up with having multiple surgeries like this. So that was definitely like my inspiration for writing this, that I'm definitely more than what's, going on a smaller scale. There's so much that goes on in a patient's life. And, I think, medical professional, they see it like a snapshot of your life and not all the things going on. So I definitely think taking the time to, as a patient, like maybe being able to, think about how you can express these things to your doctor. And then, from a medical professional perspective, I think, really taking the time to listen to how the patient is feeling.
What difference did your surgeon having that approach and that perspective make in your care or in your treatment and recovery afterwards?
I definitely felt more empowered. And, shared decision making is extremely empowering because, you as the patient are getting the opportunity to express, what you want because ultimately it is your health, right?
You have faced difficult decisions like choosing the right surgeon or going forward with surgery when the surgeon said that you shouldn't have it done until after your OT boards. What lessons from your personal story do you think should be integrated into medical education to help future providers deliver more patient-centered care?
I feel like, more education on motivational interviewing or like patient centered interviewing could be really helpful. And maybe, thinking about like questions that, you can ask patients that are, concise, but like, gets enough information to kind of, capture like who the patient is and what their goals are. Another thought that I had was something that I will sometimes do in occupational therapy is have like my client or my patient repeat back what they understood. That way, there's no like real confusion about like what's being discussed at these appointments. And then I also think, being like providing opportunities for patients to like do their own research and see if, what's being said or what's being recommended, different treatment options, if that aligns with what they want in their life and for their health.
I think that's really important to have that checking in with your patient to make sure that they understand, what's being discussed. And I saw a statistic recently that was after an appointment, patients remember about 10% of what was said during an appointment. And that is such a startling statistic. I think one way to kind of bridge that gap and to ensure that patients understand more of what is being said during an appointment is, like you said, to either ask them to share their understanding of what was said or to like check in ways so that you know that you guys are on the same page about it.
I also think giving them giving patients time to kind of think and sit with the things that are said, because it is so overwhelming. And I feel like sometimes, like when I'm in appointments, I'm usually pretty good about remembering what's said, but not until like a few days later. Like I feel like I have to like sit with it and process it before I can really understand what happened in the appointment. Um, and I guess that's another reason too, like for patients to have maybe other people like in the room with you, a trusted individual to come with you and, assist with like remembering these things or writing things down.
Absolutely. And I think there is a role for online organizations and groups who share educational materials for doctors to refer their patients to those for additional information, if they feel like they can't fully address it in clinic in that one appointment. They could say, oh, you can, refer to these resources, and then at our next appointment, we can reconvene on what questions you have about it. And you have shared a lot on your social media about your journey. What got you into sharing that? Because it's really, the way that you share it is real and it's impactful to a lot of patients.
Honestly, when I was first diagnosed, I was looking for something on Instagram specifically, some like page out there that, explained what miserable malalignment is, what it's like living with it, what it's like, going through these surgeries. Like the surgeries are very extreme. They're like bone breaking surgeries. They have to like, cut your bones and rotate it to be straight. And it's very overwhelming. And I did have the miserable malalignment Facebook group, which was like super helpful, but like I was kind of looking for like a specific like account to like help get through it, and I couldn't find it. Um, so I decided like if I can't find it, then I'm going to create it and I'm going to share my story and be really honest about what it's like to live with this condition and to go through all of these surgeries and not just the physical aspects but the emotional aspects to it as well, because sometimes, actually most of the time, I think the emotional aspect is a lot harder than the physical. So yeah, I that is really what inspired me to share my story.
I fully agree that I think the emotional and the mental aspect of these recoveries and these surgeries, it's not something that is really appreciated, like how hard it is. And so to be able to share that aspect online is an important thing to highlight. And I know that through your social media, you have connected with a lot of patients, but I do think there's a space for medical professionals to learn from what you've shared as well. And, do you think and hope that your story will shape their understanding of what patient-centered care is and what the patient experience really is?
Absolutely. Yeah, I truly hope that that's the case. And I think, I mean, because like I am a medical professional as well, so I really, do understand both sides. I understand, time constraints. I understand, it can be hard to get, a full picture of who a person is in one appointment. Like I totally understand. Um, but I just hope that, no matter what your field is, that we can kind of, relate, always try to relate it back to like, okay, who is this person? And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Can you summarize what patient-centered care and true shared decision-making practices look like for you and how healthcare professionals can effectively include patients in their care?
I definitely think encouraging open communication, sharing your story, your symptoms, and asking questions, as a patient is super important. And also for medical professionals as well, to encourage that kind of communication and also, creating a safe space to be able to share these things because, from a patient perspective, it can be really difficult to be vulnerable like that and to share, the things that you are struggling with in your day to day or the pain that you're facing or, the emotional aspects to it. Um, and again, like collaborating on the goal setting, having like the patient's goals also be the medical professional goals, to the best of, your ability, make realistic expectations. And um, I think also, from a medical professional standpoint, like, educating the patient about their condition, listening to the patient, respecting their autonomy is super important, but while also collaborating to find the best solutions, that balances the medical considerations with the patient preferences. Um, yeah, I definitely think in a nutshell, those are definitely things that I have learned, in my journey.
I think if medical professionals incorporated that into practice, it could change a lot of the way that patient care is delivered and really change the dynamic of how patients feel valued in their care. And like you said earlier, empower patients because educated patients, I think, feel more empowered and they make better decisions as a result. And that brings us to the end of the episode. And this final segment is a time to share a recent reflection or a piece of advice or a meaningful anecdote from our experiences as a patient that has stuck with us. This could be a lesson or advice for fellow patients, or even something that providers can take away to improve care. And it's just kind of a way to end the episode with a thought that resonates with listeners long after the episode. So I can go first while you think about yours. I've been thinking about the significance of medical professionals positioning within a clinic room and like taking into account patients' potentially limited mobility. Because I recently had an appointment with a doctor and I was sitting in it was like a dentist chair. It was at an oral surgery clinic. And so I was sitting in the dental chair and the doctor was standing to the side of me, leaning against the counter. And because of my spinal fusion and my reduced neck mobility, I have a hard time with like turning my head fully to the side. And for about 5 minutes, I was sitting there and completely straining my neck, trying to make eye contact with the doctor while they were talking to me. And then I finally said something because my neck was starting to hurt, and I knew that it would probably put me into a flare later in the day if I kept in that position. And so I was like, because of my mobility, are you able to position yourself more in front of me, or is there a better way that we can do this? It was a much more comfortable appointment after that, and I felt like I was able to think more clearly about what they were saying and what I wanted to say because I wasn't so focused on the discomfort that was caused by the way that they were positioning themselves. And that happened a few years ago as well. I was seeing a neurologist and I was sitting on the exam table and he was very tall and I remember he was just like standing in the side of the room and so I was like looking up and trying to turn and it that's not like my spine doesn't have that mobility and so once I shared that he was like, "Oh my gosh, let me sit down. I'm so sorry for doing that." But I think being aware of like your positioning in the room and how you're facing the patient can make a difference in how the appointment goes and in how comfortable patients might feel in opening up and sharing pieces of their story that are important to that appointment.
There's definitely something to be said about like being like sitting eye to eye, if somebody is kind of towering over you, whether, if you're sitting in a chair or like I definitely get this like when I use my wheelchair and people are, towering over me and talking and like I just like I feel kind of weird just like, like looking up and it's so much better when people kind of come down to your level. And I think, like in your doctor's appointments, like if somebody's standing over you like that, it's more intimidating. And maybe
Absolutely.
as a patient, like you're less likely, to really open up, as you said. And so, really getting eye to eye, like seeing eye to eye, and like I think that could make a patient feel a lot more comfortable and, willing to, express how they're feeling.
And I think it kind of contributes to like a power dynamic that sometimes patients might feel, which is that the medical professional is more of an authority, and if you're standing over the patient, that perspective, it's not conducive to a partnership, right? If you're in a partnership, you're equal, and body language has a big part in that. Do you want to share what your memorable moment is?
But I think for me, a huge memorable moment was actually with my last surgery that I had. It was a femoral osteotomy. Um, I was at my pre-op appointment and my surgeon came in and, I told him, how I was feeling physically, like gave him the whole rundown. Um, and after I finished speaking, he asked me like to tell him how I was feeling. And I was like, I just said how I was feeling. And then I started like telling him like all the, physically how I was feeling. And he was like, no, I mean, emotionally, like, how are you doing with this? This is your ninth surgery. This is a big surgery, where your femur is going to be broken. How are you doing emotionally? And I almost like didn't even know how to respond because it's not really a question, that I get asked in these kinds of appointments. Um, so I think from a provider perspective, just remembering to include that. I think just asking that question, it's simple. How are you feeling? Like, how are you feeling emotionally? That question can go a long way for a patient. It meant the world to me, and I'm very appreciative like for that experience. And I definitely think that, going back to the article that I wrote, that was, why I wanted to write that, because that one little question got me through that surgery and a very difficult recovery. So I'm very appreciative of that. I also think for, advice for patients, and, a lesson that I learned too is I'm the expert of my body. And so like I have a duty as well to share, how I'm feeling, like the symptoms, how it affects my daily life. Um, that's the responsibility that like, we take as patients. And then also, really trying to tap in and listen to your body and to communicate, how you're feeling. That's something that I have struggled with. I still struggle to this day, like being super honest with myself, about how I'm doing. And I think that communication is super important as well.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I am forever grateful to medical providers who do ask those questions and who want to understand more about that aspect of their patient's experience, because when we go through surgeries, the reality is no matter how quote unquote extensive or invasive that surgery is, it's still going to completely alter the way that you live your life for a certain amount of time. And that is extremely impactful to anyone's emotional, mental health, and having to prepare to live your life in a different way by going through a kind of a trauma to the body, right? Anytime you go through surgery, your body's enduring something painful and something foreign. So to acknowledge that that's a very difficult thing to do, and that you are like really your life is gonna revolve around that, and you have to tailor the way that you navigate your life during that recovery. It's not an easy thing, and I'm glad that it's something that I think is being talked about a lot more, because it allows you to better care for your patients, and to address the emotional and the mental health aspect of it. So thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. I also had one other thought, maybe having like either educational material or like different resources or like support groups or any kinds of like resources that like providers can give their patients to get through this time would also be really helpful. Like the Facebook group that I'm a part of like has been really helpful for me, but maybe there could be other resources that providers can give to their patients to help them get through this time.
Facebook groups now are a big thing. I see that with like hip dysplasia groups, but also I think providers understanding the value of peer mentoring, like if they have a patient who has been through a similar surgery and that patient might be willing to share their experience with, another patient who is about to go through that, that can be a really powerful connection as well, to have that community support from someone who has lived it.
I really like that idea. Like that, I feel like that would help a lot. I mean, I know that there's, with HIPAA and stuff, but like if you give permission and you're willing to be like a mentor to somebody else, like and to help them through, like I think that would be like so meaningful for both, like
Yeah,
for both.
there are hospitals, I know of a few programs within their hip preservation department. One of them is called PAO Buddies, I think. They connect patients who have undergone periacetabular osteotomies for hip dysplasia. And I think having more of those groups and just like connections is really important. I mean, I don't know what when I was younger, I navigated a lot of my surgeries, and my family did, like on our own, because there wasn't that support and that connection. And then as I got into high school and social media became more of a thing, I was able to connect with people both like at my hospital and with my surgeon who have undergone similar treatments, but then also around the world. And having those connections are invaluable, and it can help to address areas of care and recovery that medical professionals can't always be there for.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think, it's so different, like from, getting the perspective of a patient who's been through this, like, going to an appointment and hearing about, the surgery or like the different treatment options and stuff like that, like that only goes so far. Like, but like when you talk to somebody who's been through it, who like really understands like on a different level, it's a completely different, perspective.
It is. And, because like the medical providers can do an excellent job at educating on the, specifics of the treatment and what that recovery might look like based on PT and those bigger picture milestones in recovery, but they have a harder time understanding what is it going to be like the first week that you get home from the hospital? What tools are you going to need at home? And this also plays a lot into occupational therapy, which I know but how can you safely navigate the house after surgery, personal care and like activities of daily living? That's all stuff that you're gonna gain the most insight from patients who have lived it or through medical professionals who that's their job is to educate you on how to navigate the household.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like what's, textbook or, the expected like recovery timeline, like that only goes so far. Like everybody's different.
Mhm.
Everybody, has like other factors going on in their lives. Maybe you have other conditions like like in my recoveries, like I also have arm conditions. So like the way that I do things might look completely different, from another pe person that has miserable malalignment only. So I think, yeah, like getting insights from patients who have gone through it is extremely helpful. And like you said, like it's a whole team approach. Having like your physical therapist, your occupational therapist, your home health nurse, like all of those like insights can also really help, in your recovery.
Absolutely. And again, I think that just touches on patient-centered care and acknowledging that every patient's journey is unique. And it's important to recognize that and to support in as many ways as you can. Because it's so individualized, so it's hard to really say what is standard because everyone has their own individual experiences with it.
And that's going back to like really like listening and observing the patient, because everybody is so different. So you can't always just go based off of, a diagnosis or an image. Got to consider, multiple aspects.
100%. Wow, I love that. I think that that was such great advice from you. And we are at the end of the episode now. Where can listeners find you? And is there anything that you're working on now that you want to share about?
So I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm at aligned K and then the number 8. Um, and I am working on a memoir at the moment.
That's so
And
exciting.
I know it is really exciting and it's I mean, like I have like all the writing done and it's in like the final stages of editing. So I'm really excited about that. And hopefully, once I get closer to being finished, will announce it on Instagram and definitely let you know too. Um,
Perfect.
yeah, that's been my big project for the last year and a half. And like in the memoir, I definitely like I talk a lot about, childhood and, going through pain and not really being able to verbalize it and my diagnosis journey and kind of like where I'm at today.
Well, I can't wait to read that. And certainly when it comes out, we'll share it so that listeners can know where to find it. And I'll also put your social media handles in the description, as well as a link to your article, What I Wish My Surgeon Knew. So thank you so much, Kate. This has been really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much.